Welcome back, everyone. Mark Thomas here. Let's talk about understanding digital trust relationships. Now, these are crucial in digital trust because they help identify how data, systems, and stakeholders can interact, ensuring transparency and accountability, which can lead to digital trust. As you are most likely aware, ISACA has a framework called the Digital Trust Ecosystem Framework, or DTEF, and in this framework, you'll find some great information on identifying relationships and why this is important to your digital trust efforts. By grasping the nuances of relationships within the digital trust landscape, organizations can build a more robust framework for digital trust. So why is this important? Transparency and accountability. Strong relationships foster open communication, which is essential for transparency. Collaboration and alignment. Trust is strengthened when organizations and their partners collaborate effectively. Risk management. Understanding the dynamics between various parties helps identify potential risks in the digital supply chain. Digital sharing and privacy. Trust is fundamental for data sharing. When parties have clear understanding of their relationships, they can establish appropriate data privacy and protection measures, reassuring all stakeholders. Reputation management. Relationships influence how an organization's reputation is perceived. Regulatory compliance. Navigating complex regulatory environments often requires understanding of how different relationships impact compliance obligations. Crisis response. In times of crises, established relationships can lead to quicker and more effective responses. And finally, customer confidence. Understanding relationships within the digital supply chain can help organizations communicate their trustworthiness to customers, enhancing consumer confidence in their products and services. There are a lot of definitions of digital trust today, but I will tell you that the ISACA definition is by far the best I've seen. What makes this definition unique is that it can be applied to any size or type of organization. Let me highlight a few key terms that truly make it unique. First of all, it's having confidence in that relationship, in the integrity of that relationship, of the interaction and transaction. Now notice, it doesn't just say transaction. Digital trust is not only about a financial transaction, it could also include interactions between two parties. Next, those two parties could be providers and consumers. A provider is providing a product or a service, and a consumer is receiving that product or service within that associated digital ecosystem. Next, we are looking at people, organizations, processes, and information technology to create that digital trustworthy world. I love this definition. Now let's take a look at how relationships fit into this thing called the ISACA Digital Trust Ecosystem Framework. I'll call this the DTEF. The DTEF offers a comprehensive, globally applicable structure that enables organizations to build, maintain, and measure digital trust in their interactions with their customers and consumers. Now, this emphasizes key principles like transparency and accountability. But there are several areas associated with the DTEF that I want to talk to you about that specifically deal with relationships. Now, notice in the center of this, we've got the DTEF, but what I want to focus on here are stakeholders, relationships, and relationship mediums, where stakeholders include things like providers, consumers, third parties, proxy technologies, and digital peers. Our relationships, several there. We'll talk about these here in just a few minutes, and we'll also hit relationship mediums. It makes sense for us to take a look at these relationships or these digital interactions and transactions. You notice there are a lot of roles sitting here, but first we have a service or a product provider. This is the organization that's either providing a digital service or providing a digitally enabled product. Over on the right-hand side, we have a consumer. Notice it doesn't say customer. That consumer is a role that is consuming that product or service by that provider. Between them, we have something called a proxy technology. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. We have third parties. Those third parties could be internal or external suppliers that provide services or products in order for you to provide your service. And then finally, we have something called a digital peer. We're going to walk into these in a little bit more detail coming up. But as you see, there are a lot of complex relationships that take place in a digital relationship. So what are some of those complex relationships or types of relationships that we might run into? Well, if you take a look on the left-hand side, we could have several here. We could have a business, consumer, employee, government, constituent, and peer. What I want to do is I want to compare those to some scenarios you could run into. Now, what you see here is the ISACA DTEF description of relationship types. Let's take a look at what each one of these might look like. First of all, we may have a business-to-business relationship. This relationship includes communications, interactions, and transactions between companies with digital identities. Also known as B2B, this also comprises service providers, wholesalers, retailers, and other companies along the digital supply chain. For example, one company may purchase goods or services from another company to support its provisioning and delivery of processes. Some examples here might be a business outsources cloud services to a third party for their service management and ticketing tool. A business purchases products or services for resale from another company. Or a business representative signs a contract with another company through an e-signature platform. Next, we may have business to consumer or B2C. This relationship refers to selling and buying or providing products and services directly between a company and its consumer or the end user of its products and services. This relationship is probably the most common in a digital trust vernacular. Some examples here include a banking customer engages with an app for e-banking to upload and deposit a personal check. A consumer purchases products through an online app, or a traveler uses facial recognition to validate their credentials before boarding an airplane. Next, we may have business to employee or B2E. This relationship occurs between a company and its employees or the other direction. Employees could also include contractors that provide products or services or engage in different interactions. Some examples here: a business processes payroll data for its employees, a business stores personal information about an employee's annual performance review, or maybe an employee updates their information about insurance elections on the company's HR portal. Next, we have business to government or B2G. This relationship comprises marketing, sales, and delivery of products and services to government entities. It does not necessarily require a financial transaction and may provide a reciprocal benefit to both parties. Some examples here: a business submits their tax statements on a government tax portal. A distribution business applies for a special business permit on a state government site, or a government immigration organization interacts with a technology business regarding sponsorship of their staff. Next, we may have government to government or G2G. This is a relationship that encompasses sharing data, digital services, and technology between government agencies. Now, these relationships are often cost-effective and they enable different agencies to collaborate on common interests. So some examples here might include providing video conferencing and web services to government entities, accessing shared information systems to reduce crime, or improving communications between law enforcement departments. Next, we have government to constituent. Constituents are citizens of that state or the government jurisdiction within scope. Now, this relationship encompasses the communications, interactions, transactions between individuals and the government entities that represent them. This relationship could also include interactions and transactions between government and societies at large. Some examples here: a local government collects and tallies voting information on individual voters. A citizen responds to a tax audit online when an audit is initiated. And then finally, a local government health agency collects location information on its citizens during, say, a health pandemic. Next, we have peer-to-peer communications. This is often referred to as person-to-person. Now, this includes these relationships, communications, interactions, and possibly transactions between two individuals not associated with any business or government entity for a specific purpose. Some examples here might be two friends message via WhatsApp about private relationship matters. A social media user posts a status and pictures on Facebook, Instagram, or say TikTok. And then a friend sends money to another friend via Venmo for a set of concert tickets. Now, these are some core relationships we have within the DTEF, but we also have some secondary relationships. An ecosystem relies on several parties, and these could be internal or external. So, for instance, a provider creates value for customers when delivering products and services. Consumers can then use that value to develop new products or services to address the needs of other target consumer groups. Thus, the consumer now may become a provider. So these relationships can create a long chain of associations and expectations that ultimately contribute to the digital trust ecosystem. Now, for example, a B2C relationship, for example, a customer purchasing a product from an online retailer, could rely on a B2B relationship that supplies the product to the online retailer. Then the customer could also have a relationship with a friend, say P2P, and suggest the product through a messaging application. This entire chain of relationships could consist of numerous individual associations and varying scope, size, and type. And it could also include subcontracting relationships in a supply chain, or even something called a supply mesh. So that takes us to third parties and this digital supply chain. Enterprises are increasingly dependent on third-party vendors for business operations. Many organizations have migrated their data centers to the cloud, significantly changing the security requirements necessary to manage IT operations securely. Consider parties beyond your immediate suppliers, and these could be third party, fourth party, fifth party, etc. Evaluate their reliability, security practices, and compliance with regulations. Establish clear contracts that define roles, responsibilities, and expectations, including service level agreements and data protection clauses. Maintain open lines of communication to facilitate collaboration, address issues promptly, and share important updates. Implement ongoing monitoring of third-party activities and conduct regular audits to ensure compliance with agreed-upon standards and practices. Utilize integrated platforms for visibility across your entire supply chain, enabling real-time data sharing and collaboration amongst all parties. Develop and test incident response plans that involve all relevant parties to ensure you have a coordinated action plan in the event of a disruption or a breach. And finally, ensure that partners align with your organization's values regarding sustainability and ethical practices, promoting a responsible supply chain. We have some relationship mediums. One of the things we called these a little bit earlier were proxy technologies. These relationship mediums can include Internet of Things or IoT devices, kiosks, websites, chatbots, APIs, platform connectors, biosensors, remote scanners, you name it. I'll put together another course in the future that addresses these from a digital perspective, but for the purposes of this course, I just want you to recognize that these relationship mediums are that technology or the proxy technology that might be sitting between two key roles in a digital trust relationship. I may trust the person I'm doing business with, but I may not trust that relationship medium or that proxy technology. Now, what does all this have to do with relationships? Why is this important? Understanding these needs, expectations, and responsibilities is really important because each group has distinct needs, expectations, and responsibilities. By understanding and addressing these, you can ensure that your program meets varied requirements of users, regulators, partners, and your internal teams. This also helps you build digital trust scenarios or use cases. Understanding the relationships helps you build these use cases by providing insight into how different parties interact with your systems, your processes, and your data. It allows you to tailor use cases that reflect the real-world concerns of each group, such as, say, privacy for customers, compliance for regulators, and operational efficiency for internal teams. When you include interested parties throughout the entire digital supply chain, it can help you with stakeholder mapping, collaboration and engagement, transparency and reporting, and of course, governance, risk, and compliance. This is important because it helps you leverage digital technologies to enhance trust between those providers and those consumers. And some of the things that are important here, things like data security and privacy, transparency and traceability, personalization and responsiveness, efficient communication and problem resolution, and of course, reputation and transparency in reviews. And finally, it helps you enable digital transformation through innovation and agility. Now, automated systems and standardized processes such as identity verification or secure transactions ensure trustworthiness across all interactions without the risk of human error. And from an innovation and agility perspective, it points out how cutting-edge technologies such as AI, blockchain, cloud computing can provide flexibility and adaptability in addressing emerging threats, regulatory changes, and evolving stakeholder expectations, fostering long-term trust in your digital relationships. You want more information on this? Go out to the ISACA site. ISACA keeps the most updated information on digital trust on isaca.org/digital-trust. You can also go out there and download the Digital Trust Ecosystem Framework, which is where the information I'm presenting to you today comes from. Okay, let's finish up with some of my top tips and tricks to managing relationships in a digital trust world. Document your digitally enabled services from your service catalog. This is a big deal. Every organization should have a service catalog. And it says, here are the things we're providing to our customers or consumers. Take a look at those services you provide and understand the digital capabilities or the digital dependencies those products or services have on digital technologies. Next, document the interactions you have with each of those digital trust scenarios. Build your scenarios for every service or product you deliver and document what those interactions are so you can now understand how technology can help or hurt your trust with those stakeholders. Next, before you can determine trust, you need to know what those relationships are. Different types of relationships, different levels of relationships, and different interactions and transactions that take place between those for every service and every interaction or transaction you have. Document how that relationship is executed, and then finally create those use cases to understand those interactions and transactions. Folks, just this short presentation will vault you way ahead when you're trying to understand digital trust, how your digital products and services are leveraged, and how you can foster trust between you as a service or product provider and your customers or your consumers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your kind attention. I know this was quick, but you can find out more information on digital trust as well as many other subjects out on the e-learning site. I hope this short video has helped you out. I look forward to seeing you on the next video.